Chapter 1. Death is just the beginning. I always thought Lin Yuheng would stay. Even after I broke him, bent him, dragged him through the filth, I thought he'd stay. Because he always did. Until that night. It started like any other. Too much whiskey in my blood and too many shallow voices in my ear. We were at the private lounge in the Lee Hotel, my usual circle of parasites around me. Investors, old college friends, men who laughed too loud and said nothing. I was barely listening. My attention fixed on the screen of my phone where Yuheng's name sat in the message box. Come to 804. Bring that pretty face of yours. I didn't wait for a reply. He never said no, not even when his eyes said everything else. He arrived 20 minutes later. Hair wet from the rain, collar crooked, eyes downcast, just like always. He never wore defiance on his face, only tucked it deep inside his silence, like a dog waiting for the next kick. I looked at him, leaned back on the velvet sofa and said it. Pour drinks, and keep them entertained. You know how to smile, right? The others laughed, some raising their brows at me, and I pretended it was all a joke. But I meant every word. And he did it, just like always. Smile, serve, endure. I didn't notice the tremor in his hands until much later. He left without a word after the last of them cleared out. I didn't stop him, didn't thank him, didn't ask if he was okay. Because in my head, he was mine. He'd always come back. I was wrong. The call came in the middle of the night. Unknown number. I nearly declined it out of habit. A woman's voice, shaking. Is this Su Jinrui? I found this phone number on a note. The person. He killed himself. Room 704. Motel near East Bridge. I think he's... My heart stopped. I don't remember how I got there. My driver said I was screaming. My assistant said I hit him when he tried to pull me back. All I remember is the color of the rain. Black. Like grief. The door was half open when I arrived. The room smelled of cheap soap and blood. He was on the bed. Sheets soaked crimson. Eyes closed like he was just resting. Yuheng. My Lin Yuheng. There was a small slip of paper on the nightstand. No drama. No poetry. Just 7 words written in tiny, shaking handwriting. I don't want to be your toy. I fell to my knees. I don't know how long I stayed there, screaming at him to wake up, apologizing, pleading, promising things I should have said when he was still breathing. He didn't answer. He never would. I buried him quietly, with no press, no family, no eulogy. He didn't have any friends. I was the one who made sure of that. I remember standing at his grave in the rain, soaked to the bone. I didn't bring flowers. He never liked them. I brought his old sketchbook instead, the one he thought I never noticed. I left it on the tombstone and whispered, I loved you. I did. I just didn't know how. The crash came 3 days later. A truck. A red light I didn't see. My hands weren't even on the wheel. I was staring at the empty passenger seat. I felt the impact. Heard the crunch of steel and bone. Tasted blood. And then, nothing. Until I woke up. To the sound of my alarm clock. To my 35th floor penthouse. Spotless. Familiar. To a calendar that said, Monday, June 3rd, 8 a.m. 5 years ago. I sat up. Impossible. I checked my phone. Unread messages. One from HR. Your new assistant starts today. Lin Yuheng. Please be nice at least to this one, or we'll have to look for another. My hands shook. I laughed. I cried. I wasn't sure which. I was 5 years back. Before I destroyed him. Before I killed him. I had a chance. A real one. This time I wouldn't make the same mistakes. This time I'd protect him. Even if he hated me. Even if it was already too late. Chapter 2. The second chance that burns. The world looked the same. But I didn't. I stepped into my office like a man haunted by a ghost only I could see. The walls were the same cold marble. The windows still framed the same indifferent skyline. The coffee tasted exactly like it always had, burnt and bitter. But I knew something had shifted. This time I wasn't the one in control. Not anymore. Sir, your new assistant will be here in a few minutes. Li Chao, my secretary from HR, said through the intercom. I swallowed. My throat burned. Send him in the moment he arrives, I said. My voice didn't shake, but my hands did. I stared at the door. I knew what was about to happen, but nothing could have prepared me. The door opened. He walked in. Lin Yuheng. Alive. His hair was shorter than I remembered, neatly parted. His frame still slim, shoulders slightly hunched like he was always trying to disappear. He wore a pale gray shirt, sleeves buttoned up, not a wrinkle in sight. A lanyard hung from his neck, new and stiff. But it was his eyes that undid me. Still dark, still quiet, but unscarred. Not yet dulled by what I would one day do to him. And for a moment I couldn't breathe. Good morning, Director Su. I'm Lin Yuheng. I'll be assisting you as per HR's assignment, he said, bowing slightly. His voice. God, I'd forgotten the way it used to sound before I ruined it. Before the hoarseness from too many nights crying alone in motels or being yelled at until his throat gave out. Director Su? He prompted, his tone clipped. I stood up so fast I almost knocked the chair over. You're here early, I said. Stupid. That's what I said the first time, too. I was told to arrive at 8 o'clock sharp, he replied, not missing a beat. He didn't recognize me. Not the way I was looking at him. Of course he didn't. Not yet. But then he did something that made my heart stop. His gaze flicked to mine, held it for a second too long. There was something behind it. Something too knowing. No, couldn't be. Could it? We spent the day like strangers pretending to be colleagues. I gave him easy tasks, schedule filtering, call screening, basic documentation. Nothing stressful. Nothing like what I used to dump on him just to watch him squirm under pressure. He executed them perfectly, quietly, like a machine. I watched him over the top of my screen like an addict watching a fix he couldn't touch. He caught me staring. Twice. The second time, his lips twitched. Not a smile. Closer to disdain. And something sank in my chest. At lunch, I made my first move. Join me for lunch, I said casually, slipping into the old rhythm of command. But I softened my voice at the end. I was trying. He didn't even look up from his monitor. I brought my own, he said flatly. That didn't happen before. He used to nod and follow. Always. This time, he didn't even pretend. I tried again. There's a restaurant I'd like to recommend. My treat. Finally, he looked at me. Director Su, I'd rather keep things strictly professional. I'm not interested in workplace bonding, he said, calm but sharp. Then he turned back to his screen. My stomach twisted. He knew. I was sure of it now. By the end of the day, I was ready to confront him. I waited until the office was nearly empty. Just us and the cleaning staff. Yuheng, wait a second, I said as he gathered his things. He paused. Didn't turn around. Yes, I swallowed. Do you remember anything strange today? He turned slowly, finally facing me. The overhead lights cast soft shadows across his features. There was no fear in his expression, just exhaustion. Yes, I remembered dying, he said quietly. My heart stopped. I remembered the motel, the blood, the silence. I remembered you didn't come. My voice caught. I remembered everything, Director Su, every single thing you ever did to me, he said. He walked toward me then, not a step hesitant. And I remembered still loving you even when you broke me. Couldn't breathe. But that's not going to happen again. He pulled a folded letter from his bag and placed it on my desk. My resignation. Effective immediately. Then he walked past me. I stood there motionless, the letter burning a hole into my hands. No, not like this. Not again. I spent the night staring at that letter, reading it over and over like it held the answer to a question I hadn't asked in time. He was slipping away already, but this time I would chase him. I would fix what I broke, even if I had to bleed to earn it. Chapter 3, Shadows Between the Lines. I stared at the resignation letter long after Lin Yuheng had walked out. The signature at the bottom was steady. Too steady. It meant he'd thought about it, planned it, probably wrote this the second he opened his eyes in this life. I held the paper in my hand like it was radioactive, as if it could burn through my skin and straight to the guilt buried in my chest. I didn't tear it up immediately. I folded it once, carefully, and slipped it into my desk drawer. He remembered everything, and he still looked at me like I was a stranger. The next morning I called HR. Lin Yuheng's resignation? Reject it. Disregard it entirely. He's under contract. He stays. I said, voice cold and sharp. But sir, do it. When he arrived, he didn't even flinch seeing me at the door of the office. Just walked past with a quiet, "Good morning, Director Su." I followed him in. "I rejected your resignation," I said, watching his back. "I figured. Of course you would." He didn't turn around. Just calmly placed his bag down and turned on the computer. "I have my reasons." "I'm sure you do." His indifference sliced deeper than any insult. "Yuheng, don't call me that." His voice was soft but final. "I'm not yours to address that way anymore." I clenched my fists. Back then, I used to love his quiet voice. It was docile, submissive, like I could bend it any way I pleased. Now it was like a knife being politely pressed to my throat. I stepped closer. "You remember everything, just like I do," I said. His fingers froze above the keyboard. His body went still. Then he turned around. The look in his eyes was unreadable. Not fear, not hate, just fatigue. As if even speaking to me drained him. "I do, and I don't want to repeat any of it," he said. "I'm not the same." "Yes, you are." His interruption was quiet but lethal. "You still want to keep me here even when I ask to leave. I want to protect you this time." "By trapping me again?" The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. I stepped back. He turned to his computer again. I said nothing more that morning. But I didn't leave. The day dragged on. I tried not to hover, tried to act normal. But every second he breathed in my vicinity felt like a miracle I didn't deserve. At lunch, he pulled out a simple sandwich from his bag. I had my assistant order his favorite dish, shrimp porridge with garlic soy. It sat on his desk untouched. "You remembered," he said finally, staring at the bowl without touching it. "I remember everything," I said quietly. He pushed the bowl aside. "So do I." In the afternoon, he dropped his pen. I moved to pick it up. He froze when our fingers brushed. Back then, he would flinch, panic, then cover it up like it was his fault. Now he looked at me dead on. "Don't pretend you didn't kill me," he said. "I'm not pretending, I know I did." I whispered. "I just want to live this time without you," he said, his voice tight. I couldn't speak, couldn't argue, because what argument could I make that wouldn't sound like a lie? Later that evening, I walked out of my office to find him leaving. He had his bag slung over one shoulder, his eyes fixed straight ahead. I called out, "Lin!" He didn't stop, didn't even acknowledge me. It hit harder than any slap. I watched the elevator doors close on his face, on his silence, and felt something inside me collapse. He wanted to live without me, but I couldn't let him walk away. Not again. Not when I'd finally learned how much I could lose. This time I would show him the truth. That I loved him. That I always did. Chapter 4. Strings that strangle. I used to think silence meant obedience. When Lin Yuheng didn't speak, didn't resist, didn't cry, I thought it meant I'd won. But now I know better. Silence is what people use when words don't matter anymore. When they know no one's listening. And I had spent years not listening. It was a Thursday when I tried again. 3 days since he handed me that resignation letter. 3 days of being ignored in my own office. 3 days of reliving every inch of our twisted history, and knowing exactly which parts he remembered because I remembered them too. And some nights I couldn't breathe just thinking about it. I walked into the office early that morning and placed a paper bag on his desk before he arrived. A croissant from that tiny French bakery he used to love. Back then, I made fun of it. I called it peasant food once, just to see how small he'd shrink when he thought he was being ridiculous for liking something soft and sweet. I sat down and waited. He came in 10 minutes later. Always punctual. Still too polite to slam the door, though I almost wished he would. His eyes landed on the bag. His steps slowed. I watched the quiet clench of his jaw. He sat down, pulled the croissant out, looked at it like it was poison. Then he spoke without looking at me. "You're trying too hard." "I'm trying at all," I said quietly. He gave a humorless little huff and took a small bite, chewing like he regretted it. I should have been glad. But all I saw was how little joy he got from things he once loved. Because of me. Around noon, Li Chao from HR came in. "Director Sue, about the board dinner tonight." Before she could finish, I cut in. "Cancel it." She blinked. "Sir." I said cancel. "Tell them I'm unavailable." She glanced awkwardly at Yuheng and left. He didn't say anything. Not until 10 minutes later. "You used to drag me to those dinners." I looked up. He still wasn't looking at me, but his tone was sharper. "You'd humiliate me in front of your clients. Pretend I was some desperate office whore who followed you around for scraps." "I remember," I said, and I did. Too clearly. Flashback. The restaurant was upscale. The type with velvet curtains and wine I didn't understand. I had too much to drink, as usual. Yuheng stood beside me, nervous, unsure if he was supposed to sit or just hover behind like a servant. He wore a white shirt that clung to his slim frame, the top button missing because I'd ripped it earlier, impatient after a stressful meeting. He wasn't supposed to come, but I wanted him there. No, claimed him there, like a possession. One of the investors made a joke about him being my pet. A kept thing. Something for decoration. I laughed, then said, "He's good for one thing, staying quiet." Yuheng had smiled politely, and then spent the rest of the night drinking water while everyone else got drunk on wine and power. "I'm not going to treat you like that again," I told him. He finally looked up at me, and I wished he hadn't. There was so much pain behind his eyes it made my stomach turn. "I'm not staying long enough to give you the chance. Once my contract ends, I'm leaving," he said. "I won't stop you," he scoffed. "You already are." After work, I waited for him in the parking garage. Not to ambush, not to beg, just to watch him leave safely. Back then, I never cared how he got home. Sometimes I ordered him to come back to my place at 2 a.m., just because I was drunk or bored or lonely. He'd arrive pale and exhausted, and I never asked if he'd eaten. Now I stood by my car, silent, hands in my pockets. When he walked past, I said, "I'll give you a ride." He didn't break stride. "I'd rather walk. It's raining." "I don't melt." I followed from a distance, umbrella in hand. He didn't look back once. Halfway down the street, he slipped slightly on the wet sidewalk. My heart lurched. I almost ran to him, but he steadied himself before I could even move. He didn't need me. That was the part that cut deepest. That night, I stood at my balcony, watching the city drown under the rain. I wondered if he still cried when no one was looking. I wondered if he ever thought about the few nights we shared that weren't awful. There weren't many, but there were some. Nights when he'd sit quietly beside me and I'd fall asleep with his shoulder against mine. Mornings when I'd wake up and, for one brief second, think about kissing him before the poison in me took over. I killed those moments before they could bloom. Now I'd die to have just one of them back. But he wasn't the same man anymore. Neither was I. And maybe, just maybe, that meant we still had a chance to become something different. Chapter 5. Leash of Regret. Love isn't supposed to feel like possession. But I didn't know that until I lost him. I wasn't ready to let him walk out of my life again. So I used the only tool I used to trust, control. It started with a phone call to legal. A quiet voice on the other end said, "Director Sue, the contract in question is still binding. Unless the employee presents a formal breach or a medical exemption, he cannot terminate unilaterally before the first 90 days. Enforce it," I said. "But," silently, "don't make a case of it." I hung up. My chest felt tight. This wasn't about owning him. It was about time. I needed more time to fix this, to prove something to him, to myself. But maybe I just didn't know how to let go. When Lin Yuheng came into the office the next day, he looked more exhausted than usual. His eyes were slightly red. He didn't speak to me, didn't even glance my way. I knew that look. It was the one he wore the day after I slapped him in the old timeline. Flashback. He'd come into the office 15 minutes late. His lip was swollen, his tie crooked. I had dragged him into my office and yelled at him for being unprofessional. He tried to explain. Said his mother was in the hospital. I didn't listen, didn't care. I slapped him. Hard. He didn't cry. Just whispered, "I'm sorry, Director Sue," and left the room. I didn't speak to him for 3 days. Back then, I thought that was discipline. Now, I know it was cowardice. Present. Around noon, I saw the email come in. Contract dispute request, Lin Yuheng. I clicked on it. He was trying to break it anyway. That night, I waited by the building exit. When he saw me standing there, he didn't stop walking. "Yuheng," I called. He kept going. I followed. "Yuheng." He turned sharply in the underground lot. "Stop calling me that." My chest tightened. "I'm not trying to control you," I said. He laughed, sharp and bitter. "Then what do you call this? You've legally trapped me in a job I begged to leave. That's not control. You don't understand." "I understand perfectly. I remember the bruises. I remember being locked in your apartment for 3 days without food because I looked at another man. I remember what control feels like." Su Jinrue. His voice shook, but not with fear. With fury. And something worse, disgust. "I'm trying to protect you. I'm trying to make up for what I did," I whispered. He stared at me like I was speaking a language he hated. "You don't fix something by recreating the cage, you fix it by letting go of the leash," he said. He walked away. I didn't follow this time. I just stood there, in the cold, empty parking lot, the hum of the city fading behind me. He was right. I was still pulling the leash. Even now. Even when I swore I'd changed. Because deep down, I still didn't know how to love without tying someone down. The next morning, I sent a memo to HR. Contract nullification. Effective immediately. No retaliation, no interference. Let him go if he asks. Then I sat back in my chair. My heart ached. But it was the right thing. If he chose to stay, it had to be his choice. Around 5:45 p.m., he stepped into my office without knocking. He held a single document in his hand. I braced myself for the end. He placed it on my desk. It wasn't a resignation. It was his revised work schedule. He didn't speak, just turned to leave. I couldn't help myself. "Why? You could have walked," I asked. He paused at the door, didn't look back. "I want to see how far you're willing to go," he said. Then he left. And just like that, I started breathing again. Not because I'd won, but because, for the first time, he wasn't walking away. Not yet. Chapter 6. Apologies that bleed. People think apologies are a salve. Say the words, bandage the wound, walk away clean. But what do you say to someone whose blood you wore like cologne for years? What do you say to a man you broke, rebuilt, and broke again? What could I possibly say to Lin Yuheng that wouldn't sound like another form of cruelty? It was raining again. Of course it was. The universe always loved to mock me in grayscale. I stood by the window in my office, watching the city drown in water and light. Below, traffic crawled through the slick streets like exhausted ants. Inside, the only sound was the soft scratch of Lin Yuheng's pen. He was back at his desk, still here. Not because I deserved it, but because he wanted to watch me try. He didn't speak to me unless it was work-related. No glances, no small talk, just walls, impeccably built walls. But I could see the cracks, and maybe I was desperate enough to try slipping through them. I waited until the others had left for the day. "Yuheng," I said quietly. His hand paused mid-stroke. "Director Sue, can we talk?" He looked up at me with that expression I'd come to dread, cold patience. Like I was a storm he was waiting to pass. "I'm listening," he said. I swallowed, and sat down across from him, not behind the desk. Beside it, an equal, at least in position. "I owe you an apology. You owe me 100, I don't need any of them," he said. "I need to say them." He crossed his arms, leaned back. "Then speak." I looked at him. Really looked. Not the way I used to, searching for weakness, for submission. for a reaction I could control. I looked at him like a man facing his own crime scene. I hurt you. He raised an eyebrow. That's it. I shook my head. I ruined you. I stripped away everything that made you feel safe. I used your silence as an excuse to keep pushing. I called it loyalty when it was fear. I called it love when it was obsession. I know that now. Lin Yuhing stared at me like he was waiting for the punchline. You're rehearsing this, makes it easier for you to pretend you're not still manipulating me. He said. I'm not. You are, everything you do is a performance. Guilt repackaged as sincerity. You're not here to make me feel better. You're here to make you feel less like a monster. He cut in, voice sharp. I flinched. Because he was right. And because I hated that he knew me better than I ever knew him. I didn't know how to love you. I thought needing you meant owning you. I said, quieter now. You didn't need me, you needed someone to bleed for you. He said. Flashback. He was crying on the floor. That much I remember. Not loud, not sobbing. Just quiet, steady tears sliding down his cheek as he knelt beside my desk. His wrist was bruised. I don't remember why. I stood over him, angry at something meaningless. A deal that fell through. An investor who disrespected me. And Yuhing, he tried to comfort me. It's okay, Director Su. We'll recover. I'll work overtime this weekend. You don't need to worry. I remember sneering. You're not my therapist, Yuhing. You're barely my assistant. And then I walked out, left him there, like trash I'd forgotten to take out. I remember you begging me to look at you, and I didn't. I said, voice low. Lin Yuhing's hands were folded neatly in his lap. His eyes were dry, but there was something breaking behind them. You didn't just ignore me, he said. I'm sorry. You think sorry helps now? No, but it's all I have. Right now, it's the only thing that's real, I said. He stood. I rose with him instinctively, afraid he'd walk out again. But he didn't. He leaned closer instead, just enough that I could smell his cologne. Light and clean, the same one he used before I told him to change it. You don't get to apologize and expect a reaction. This isn't your redemption arc, Su Jinrui, he said. I met his gaze. Then what is it? He tilted his head slightly, as if considering something, then said, a slow death, for both of us. And then he walked out. I didn't stop him, because for the first time I finally understood. This wasn't about forgiveness. This was about survival. And I wasn't the one bleeding anymore. He was, and he still came to work every day with open wounds, just to prove he could. That night, I sat alone in my penthouse, the lights off, the city screaming outside my windows. I stared at my reflection in the glass, and I asked myself, if he never forgives me, if he never loves me again, would I still try? Would I still crawl through the wreckage I made? Would I still want him, even if I had to want him from afar? The answer was yes. Yes, 1,000 times over. Chapter 7. The Motel That Never Sleeps. There's a motel off East Bridge Road that never closes. One of those places people go to disappear for a few hours. Cheap curtains, flickering lights, a bed that doesn't ask questions. I hadn't seen it since the first time I lost him. But I went back. Because pain has a strange gravity. Pulls you toward it. So I did. I left work early. My entire skull pulsed with the memory of his voice saying, you didn't come. I drove alone. No driver, no assistant. Just me and the hum of tires over wet concrete. The rain came down in quiet sheets, soaking the edges of the city and blurring the windshield. For a moment, I imagined it was the same rain from that night. Maybe it was. Time liked to replay scenes when I least deserved it. I parked across the street from the motel and stared at it for a long time. It was still there, still ugly, still small, still the graveyard of my sin. The red neon sign buzzed weakly. Rooms available. That same sign had glowed over his body while I knelt beside him, screaming at him to wake up. Now it blinked at me like a dare. I walked in. The lobby smelled like mildew and cigarettes. A bored old man sat behind the desk, flipping through a newspaper that looked a decade old. He didn't even look up when I said, Room 704. He slid the key across the counter like it meant nothing. It meant everything. The hallway hadn't changed. Dim lighting, faint buzzing, dirty beige carpet that swallowed sound. I stopped outside 704. My hand hovered over the door handle. This was where I stopped being human. I turned the key. The room was exactly as I remembered. One bed, peeling wallpaper, a desk stained with old cigarette burns. I stepped inside, closed the door, and stood there like a man walking into his own crime scene. I saw him again, curled up on that bed, wrists open, blood soaking the sheets. I could still smell it if I let myself. Not the copper tang of blood, but the scent of him underneath it. Soft soap, rainwater, sadness. He must have sat here for hours before he did it. Maybe he stared at the ceiling. Maybe he wrote that note and rewrote it 10 times before he dared to make it real. I don't want to be your toy. I sat on the edge of the bed and buried my face in my hands. And for a long time I didn't move. In that life, I was drunk. He was quiet. I told him to come meet me. Bring that mouth of his. Put on something tight. Be charming. I didn't say please. I didn't ask if. I just assumed. He came. Like always. My friends laughed when I made him pour their drinks. One of them touched his lower back when he walked past. I didn't stop them. I watched. He didn't say a word. Not when I asked him to stay after. Not when I tossed a wad of cash on the table and told him to take a cab. His hands were shaking. I ignored that. The next time I saw him, he was already dead. I leaned back on the bed and stared at the ceiling. Same cracks in the paint. Same silence. I imagined him lying here, alone, exhausted, done. Did he cry? Did he hesitate? Did he hope, even once, that I would show up in time? That I'd stop him? The truth is, I was probably in someone else's bed when he took his last breath. I don't remember. That's the worst part. The last night of his life, and I don't even remember where I was. The lights flickered once. Then again. I stood slowly, walked to the window. Outside, the rain had stopped. But I hadn't. I was still falling. Still breaking. Still chasing a man who had every reason to hate me. But I would keep chasing. Until I earned the right to stand beside him again. Not as a master. Not as a monster. Just a man who finally learned how to love. Chapter 8. Chains Made of Flowers. I used to think money could solve everything. And in some ways, it did. It bought silence. It bought loyalty. It bought time. I used to believe it could buy love too, if not real, then obedient enough. But Lin Yuheng never loved me for what I gave him. He loved me despite it. Despite the cruelty. Despite the cages. Despite the long hours and the broken sleep and the bruises he wore like secrets. And in return, I gave him nothing but a leash and called it affection. Now, I couldn't look at him without thinking of what I owed. So I started where I should have years ago, giving without expectation. It began with the hospital bill. I found out his mother had been quietly transferred to a cheaper facility last month. He didn't tell anyone, didn't ask for help. Of course he didn't. Back then, I told him needing others was weakness. So he learned to suffer alone. I called the hospital myself. Anonymous donor, clear her account. Upgrade her care. Keep his name off everything. I said. The woman on the phone hesitated. Sir, do you have authorization from the family? I'm paying the full amount in cash. I don't need permission. I need discretion. Next came the apartment. His building was the same crumbling complex I'd ignored in the past. I used to mock it behind his back. What kind of grown man still shares walls with rats? He knew I said it. He just swallowed it. Now, I bought out the lease quietly and paid 6 months forward under an alias. Left an envelope with the landlord marked. Paid in full. No eviction. No interference. I didn't expect him to find out so fast. But Lin Yuheng always did have a sense for my fingerprints. We were in the office when it happened. He slammed the door open so hard the glass rattled. I looked up from my laptop. Yuheng. Stop calling me that, he snapped. His voice wasn't calm. It was sharp, cold, wounded. I asked around. The hospital staff gave me the name of the payment source. A holding company. One of yours. I stood up slowly. I didn't do it to interfere. No? Then what would you call it? He was trembling. Not out of fear. Out of rage. You're still doing it. Still pulling strings. Still acting like I belong to you? Like you can fix me by throwing money at the parts you broke. I stepped around the desk. I wasn't trying to fix you. I was trying to give you peace. You don't get to give me peace, you took it. He spat. Flashback. He came to work after visiting his mother in the hospital. He was pale, starving, drenched from the rain. I didn't offer him food. I didn't offer a ride. Instead, I gave him a project with a 24-hour deadline and said, if you're going to cry, do it somewhere I don't have to hear it. He bit his lip and nodded. Worked through the night. Collapsed in the break room at 4 a.m. I stepped over him and left. I'm not trying to buy your forgiveness, I said. I know you're trying to buy your own, he replied. I said nothing, because I couldn't deny it. Because some part of me was hoping that if I did enough, if I bled enough, he might one day stop looking at me like I was a scar he regretted getting. He turned to leave, then paused. I didn't ask for your money. I know, and I won't thank you for it. I wouldn't want you to. He looked at me then. For real. Not as a CEO. Not as a former lover. Just a man. Broken. Open. Too late. Something flickered in his expression. Too fast to name. Then he left. That night, I sat on the floor of my living room with a whiskey I didn't drink and a silence that screamed. I stared at the ceiling and whispered to no one. You never asked me for anything. And maybe that was the problem. Maybe I should have begged back then. Begged him to ask me to stay. Begged him to teach me how to love. Now all I could do was follow his shadow and hope he'd let me walk beside him again one day. Even if he never looked back. Chapter 9, The Silent Outburst. There's a kind of silence that isn't peace. It's pressure. Static. A balloon stretched too tight, waiting for the smallest pinprick. That's what being near Lin Yuhing felt like every day now. Like I was holding my breath inside a porcelain room, knowing the cracks were forming, knowing I was the one who built the walls wrong in the first place. But still, I hoped he'd thaw. I hoped his silence meant patience. I hoped he was waiting for me to prove I wasn't just the man who killed him the first time. What I forgot was, even silence breaks. It happened on a Tuesday. Late. Office mostly empty. Rain again. Always the rain. We had barely spoken all day except for clipped updates and one-word replies. I tried not to crowd him. Tried not to hover. Tried to give him space without vanishing. But I couldn't help it. Around 6:45, I walked into his corner of the office with a coffee. The same kind he used to like. I placed it on his desk quietly. He didn't look up. Don't, he said. One word. Soft. Flat. I froze. What? Don't do this today, he said, still not looking at me. I thought. You thought what? He stood, chair scraping loudly against the floor. You thought this would help? A cup of coffee and suddenly I forget the years you spent turning me into a ghost. Yuheng. Stop calling me that. His voice cracked like a whip. Sharp. Raw. I swallowed. I'm sorry. Lin Yuheng. He stepped out from behind the desk and faced me fully. His eyes were bloodshot, but he wasn't crying. He was finally burning. You keep doing these little things. Quiet charity, soft voices, pity disguised as kindness. And you think that's enough to fix it. I don't think it's enough, I said. Then why keep doing it? Because it's all I can do right now. No, you could let me leave. You could stop showing up at every turn like a shadow I can't shake. You could stop chasing a love you murdered with your own hands. He snapped, stepping closer. I didn't speak. Couldn't. Because he was right. He kept going, voice shaking. I wanted to be loved, not owned. I wanted to be seen, Jinrue. And you looked at me like I was a stray dog who forgot how to bite. I see you now, I said quietly. It's too late. I know. Then why are you still here? I looked at him and said the only truth I had left. Because I didn't realize I was in love with you until you were already dead. He flinched, eyes wide, just for a second. Then the fury came back. You don't get to say that now, you don't get to drag that word out of your mouth and expect me to believe it, he whispered. I'm not asking you to believe it. I'm asking you to let me prove it. I did let you once. He shook his head, laughing bitterly. You said you loved me back then, too. You said it while pinning me to a bed I didn't want to be in. You said it while deleting my messages, while locking the door behind me, while canceling my job interviews so I wouldn't leave you. I was sick, I admitted. I know. And I stayed. His voice cracked. I stayed. And every day I woke up hoping it would be the day you looked at me like I was a person. Flashback. He stood in the doorway, suitcase in hand. I want to leave, he said quietly. I looked up from my drink. You're being dramatic. My mom's sick. I need to go home. I'll have someone send money. I don't want your money. Then what the hell do you want? I snapped. He hesitated, then whispered, just someone to come with me. I didn't move, didn't even look up again. He left without another word. I told myself he'd be back. He was, but not for long. I know I ruined you, I said. Yuhing looked at me, furious tears trembling in his eyes. You didn't ruin me. You taught me how to live without love, he said. He walked out, didn't slam the door, didn't look back. And I didn't follow, because I knew, if I touched him now, even to apologize, it would all be undone. This time I had to let him leave. Let him burn it out of himself. Let the pain exit his body for once, not mine. Later that night, I found his old notebook on my desk. The one he always carried in the past. He must have dropped it in the office by accident. Or maybe not. Inside, on a torn page, was a single line written in small, hard strokes. I stayed to see if you'd change. Nothing else. No explanation. No name. But I knew. He hadn't stayed out of love. He stayed out of grief. And I would carry that weight in my bones until the day he forgave me. Or until I learned how to live with never hearing it. Chapter 10. When fireflies flicker. He didn't come to work the next day. Didn't text. Didn't call. Didn't explain. I told HR to give him the day off. Paid. No questions. Not because I was being generous. Because if I pushed 1 inch harder, he'd disappear again. And this time I wasn't sure I'd survive it. The day dragged like a funeral procession. I sat in my office, scrolling through meaningless reports, rereading his note from the night before. I stayed to see if you'd change. It wasn't a promise. It wasn't even hope. It was a test, and I had no idea how much longer I had to pass it. He came in the next morning, silent, tired, but he didn't quit. He didn't leave. That was enough. We didn't speak for most of the day. He worked at his desk. I worked at mine, but the tension between us had changed. Less like a wire about to snap. More like something frayed but holding. Late in the afternoon, a knock interrupted the silence. Li Chao again. Director Su, the lunch you requested is here, she said. I nodded. Bring it in. She paused, looked between us, then quietly left the box on the coffee table and vanished. I turned to Lin Yuheng. I didn't order anything extravagant. Just what you used to eat, I said. He looked up. No sarcasm. No cutting edge. Just exhaustion. What is it? He asked. Shrimp porridge. Scallion pancakes. Cold cucumber salad. He hesitated. Then finally stood. Walked over. Sat down across from me. No words. Just that. And for me it felt like the biggest win of my life. We ate in silence. The kind that used to be dangerous. Now it felt tentative. Fragile. Like holding a firefly in your hands and hoping it wouldn't break. He picked at his food slowly. I didn't push. Didn't try to make conversation. Didn't pretend we were okay. I just sat there, beside him, breathing the same air without filling it with noise. Halfway through the meal he spoke. Quiet, but deliberate. You didn't used to remember what I liked. I looked at him. He wasn't accusing. Just stating. You never asked, he added. I didn't think I had to. I thought being close to you meant I understood you. I said, my voice low. He gave a soft, humorless smile. That's the cruelest part. You were close enough to break me, but never close enough to see me, he said. Flashback. He was sick. I remember that. Flu. Fever. Voice nearly gone. I still dragged him to a board meeting. Made him stand behind me, shivering in his thin suit, because I couldn't bear to attend alone. Afterward, he collapsed in the car. I told the driver to take us home, not to a hospital. At home, I laid him on the bed. He curled in on himself. "Do you want anything?" I asked, irritated. He whispered, barely audible, "Shrimp porridge." I scoffed, told him to sleep it off. I ordered steak for myself and left him there. Now he was eating shrimp porridge across from me, not because I offered, but because he let me. That distinction mattered. It was everything. He set his spoon down halfway through the bowl and said, "I don't hate you." I froze. The room felt suddenly too quiet. "But I don't forgive you either." "I'm not asking for that," I said. He looked at me then. Really looked. "You always say that. But you want it. You need it. You wear guilt like it's a chain and hope I'll be the one to take it off. I'm wearing it because I earned it." "Good, then carry it," he said. He stood and walked back to his desk. Left half the porridge untouched. I didn't stop him. I stayed seated for a while, hands folded, staring at the bowl. He didn't finish it, but he took the first bite. That was enough for now. Maybe forgiveness didn't come all at once. Maybe it came in teaspoons. And for once I was willing to wait, even if it took the rest of this lifetime. Chapter 11. Fractured glass. I used to think showing up was enough. Being there, physically, body in the room, name on the message, face at the table. But the truth is, I spent years standing right in front of Lin Yuheng without ever truly arriving. Now, the first time he needed someone, really needed someone, I ran. Not away. Toward him. It happened on a Thursday. The rain had stopped for once, and the morning sun slipped through the windows like it didn't know how to apologize for hiding. We were both in the office early. Yuheng was reviewing some financial proposals, head bent, sleeves rolled up just past the wrist. I remember thinking he looked too thin again. I remember wanting to ask if he'd eaten. I didn't, still too afraid to say the wrong thing. So I kept watching him in silence, until the sound of shattering glass broke through everything. It was a crash, sharp, sudden. Then a dull, sickening thud. I looked up just in time to see Lin Yuheng stumble backward, the edge of a broken glass cup falling from his hand. His foot had slipped. The cup had shattered. But it wasn't the glass that scared me. It was the way he hit the floor. Hard. Wrong. Shoulder first. Then nothing. I was out of my chair before I even realized I was moving. "Yuheng." He didn't respond. I dropped to my knees beside him, fingers already trembling. "Yuheng. Come on, talk to me." He groaned faintly, brows pinching. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused. "Jean Rouet?" The sound of my name on his lips, so dazed, so vulnerable, nearly shattered me. "Don't move, don't. Just stay down," I said quickly. I lifted him carefully, ignoring the sharp sting of glass against my palm, and cradled him against me. "You're okay," I said, more to myself than him. "You're okay. I've got you." His body was burning hot. Fever? Shock? Maybe both. "I'm sorry," he mumbled. I blinked. "Why are you? Don't say that. You didn't do anything." But he was already slipping under again. I carried him to the car myself, told the driver to shut up and drive, held Yuheng in the back seat with a towel pressed to his head, whispering things I never had the courage to say while he was awake. "You're not a burden. You're not a mistake. I was the one who broke you, not the other way around." His breath was shallow, uneven, and every time he winced I hated myself more. At the hospital I didn't wait in line, didn't sit, didn't breathe properly until they wheeled him away and told me to wait outside. So I did. For hours. No assistant. No calls. No laptop. Just me. Sitting like a punished schoolboy outside the ER with my hands still bleeding and my heart stuck somewhere in my throat. Flashback. He once fainted in the office. Same cause. Stress, low blood sugar, overwork. I walked in, saw him unconscious on the ground. Did I panic? No. I asked the intern to call the driver. Had them carry him to my car like a package. Dropped him at the hospital and left before he even opened his eyes. Didn't visit. Didn't call. I told myself I was too busy. Told myself he'd be fine. He was. And he never asked why I didn't come. Now I understood that was the worst part. When the doctor came out, I stood so fast the chair behind me scraped across the tile. He's stable, mild concussion. Slight fracture in his shoulder. We're keeping him overnight for observation. The doctor said, "Can I?" "You can see him, he asked for you." The doctor nodded. I froze. He asked? Yes. Called you by name. I couldn't speak. I stepped into the hospital room quietly. The lights were dim. Monitors hummed softly. And there he was, propped up in bed, one arm in a sling, eyes half-lidded but awake. He looked at me, didn't flinch, didn't turn away. "Hey!" I said softly. "Hey!" he replied. I stepped closer, sat beside the bed. "You scared the hell out of me." "Good, now you know how it feels," he said. Despite myself, I smiled. "Noted." He looked at my hand then, still bandaged from picking up the broken glass. "You're bleeding. I'll live." A long silence passed. Then, "You didn't leave." "No, I didn't," I said. His eyes flicked to the ceiling, then back to me. "You used to leave." "I know." He studied me for a moment, then said, voice barely above a whisper, "I didn't know if you'd come this time. I will always come now, even if you tell me not to," I said. Another pause. Then he turned his head away, but not in anger, not in rejection, just to hide something. And I realized he was crying, quietly, privately, like always. But this time I stayed. This time I didn't look away. Chapter 12, The Confession. I never believed in redemption. Not really. You don't erase blood with flowers. You don't fix fractures with soft words whispered too late. And you don't come back from killing the only person who ever loved you. But sitting in that hospital room, watching Lin Yuheng sleep, breathing, bandaged, alive, I realized something. Even if I didn't believe in redemption, I still wanted him to know the truth before he walked away for good. He woke up around midnight. I was still there. Hadn't moved from the stiff hospital chair. Didn't want to. His eyes opened slowly, adjusting to the dark. And then he looked at me, groggy, tired, but aware. "You should go home," he said, voice scratchy. "I don't want to. You never used to stay overnight. I never used to do a lot of things I should have." He blinked at me, waited, and for once, I didn't let the silence win. "I used to think you were mine. From the moment you stepped into my office. You were quiet, efficient, obedient. I thought that meant I owned you," I said. He didn't interrupt. He just stared at the ceiling. "I used to count the ways you looked at me. How many times your eyes lingered when you thought I wasn't watching. How many times you flinched and then covered it with a smile." I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. "I told myself it was love, that you just didn't know it yet." I laughed bitterly. "It wasn't love. It was fear. You were surviving me." He didn't look at me, but his throat worked, swallowing emotion, or pain, or both. "I never hit you without a reason," I said. "Bullshit," he whispered. "I know." I looked down at my hands. Clean now, but they still felt stained. "You cried once in the elevator. Remember that?" "Which time?" "First time you'd worked 38 hours straight. No food, no sleep. You were slumped in the corner, trying not to fall apart," I said. He said nothing. "I watched you cry and felt powerful, like I'd carved myself into you, like I'd won something." My voice broke then. "I was so proud of making you need me, like your dependence proved I mattered." Finally, he turned to look at me. His eyes weren't angry. They were just tired. "You ruined me," he said. "I did." He didn't say anything for a while. Neither did I. The only sound was the faint beep of the heart monitor behind him, steady and slow. "I found your body." His eyes widened slightly. I kept going. "That night, in the motel, room 704. I got a call. I thought it was a prank. I didn't believe it until I opened the door and saw you. I could still see it. His pale skin. The blood. The note. You looked peaceful. That was the part that killed me. You finally looked at peace, and I wasn't part of it. His jaw clenched. I carried you out, held your body and screamed at you to come back. I begged, you hung. But you were already gone. I said, voice shaking. He sat up slowly, grimacing at the ache in his shoulder. Why are you telling me this? He asked. Because I need you to hate me for what I actually did. Not the version of me you built in your head to survive. The real me, the monster I was. He was silent for a long time, then said, I don't hate you. I looked at him, startled. You should. I did for a long time. Every time I woke up in this life, I wanted to scream. I wanted to kill you before you could ever touch me again. He admitted. So why didn't you? His eyes dropped to the blanket in his lap. Because I remembered something worse than all of it. What? He looked at me and said, with a hollow, cracked voice, I remembered still loving you anyway. The words hit me like a blade. Not because they were romantic, but because they were true. Brutally, beautifully, devastatingly true. And now they scared me more than hate ever could. I reached out, slowly, carefully, not to touch him, just to close the distance a little. His fingers twitched, but he didn't pull away. And for the first time since I'd been given this second chance, I didn't feel like a monster, just a man holding his own sorrow in both hands and praying he wouldn't drop it again. Chapter 13. Resignation accepted. Letting go was never in my nature. I held on to everything: power, pride, pain, people. Especially him. Even when all I did was hurt him, I held on. Because if he stayed, then maybe I wasn't the villain I feared I was. If he stayed, then maybe I could pretend I was still worthy of being loved. But I wasn't pretending anymore. And Lin Yuheng didn't owe me anything. Not his time, not his presence, and certainly not a second chance. So when he handed me his resignation, again, I didn't tear it up, just opened it. To Director Sue. Subject: formal resignation, effective immediately. It was neat, precise, professional. But at the bottom, in a different handwriting, more personal, he'd written a single line. Would you cry this time if I died? I stared at the sentence for a long time. It wasn't meant to be cruel. It was a mirror, a reflection of what I'd said to him in the worst moment of my life. Flashback. He had been standing in the kitchen, exhausted, trembling, but still trying to make breakfast for me. I'd come home at 3 a.m. the night before, drunk and cold. He'd said something soft. Do you even care if I'm here anymore? I'd scoffed, grabbed my keys and said, would you cry if I died? He didn't answer. I didn't look back. Now the question had been turned on me, and the answer was already written into my skin. I looked up. He was still standing there, still waiting. I handed the letter back. No need, I said. His brows drew together. I accept. His mouth parted slightly. He blinked. You're not going to stop me? I stopped you the first time, and it killed you. He didn't speak, didn't sit, just stood there like he didn't know what to do with freedom when it came without a fight. I want you to go, I said. His lips twitched, almost a smirk, but it didn't quite make it. Wow, you really have changed, he said softly. Don't sound so surprised. I'm just not used to it, he said. He turned to leave, paused at the door, didn't look back when he said, you know, part of me always hoped you'd beg. I swallowed hard. I would've, before. But I'm not chasing you anymore. Why not? Because if you come back, I want it to be your choice, not mine, I said. He didn't respond, didn't need to. The silence was enough. Then he walked out, and I let him. I sat in that empty office for hours, didn't touch the paperwork, didn't take any calls. I just stared at the empty chair across from me where he used to sit. The last time I let him walk away, I spent 5 years convincing myself he'd return. This time I wouldn't wait, but I'd remember, not out of obsession, out of respect. because loving him now meant wanting him whole, even if that meant loving him from far away. Before I left the office, I took his cup from the corner of the desk. The chipped one. The one he always refused to let anyone replace. I rinsed it, dried it, put it back on the shelf. Just in case. Chapter 14. Fireflies in the Dark. 3 months after Lin Yuhing left, the office finally stopped smelling like him. Not all at once. Faded slowly, like memory, like regret. The lemon tea scent he always wore. The faint cologne that clung to his sweaters. Gone. I didn't replace his chair. Didn't assign a new assistant. Didn't let anyone else sit at his desk. People whispered. I let them. Let them say I was grieving a broken engagement, or that I'd gone soft, or that I was finally losing my mind. Maybe they were right. But none of them had stood in a motel room with a dead man they'd created. None of them had seen him come back to life and choose to walk away. That kind of pain doesn't just live in your chest. It builds a home in your bones. I didn't contact him. Not once. No emails. No texts. No late-night calls pretending to be about work. I deleted his number so I wouldn't be tempted. But I remembered it anyway. Then, one Sunday, Li Chao burst into my office. Flustered. Sir, I thought you should know. Lin Yuhing opened a business. My head snapped up. What? She handed me her phone. There it was. A soft launch post from a new account. Firefly Cafe. Grand opening this Friday. Simple logo. Warm lighting. A few blurry photos of pastries. And in one of them, just barely visible, Yuhing. Smiling. I stared at that smile for a long time. Not the forced smile he wore for my clients. Not the empty one he used to put on after I made him cry. This one looked real. Free. I stared at it until my chest ached. And then I said, clear my schedule Friday morning. Li Chao blinked. Should I notify his manager? No. Friday. 9 a.m. I stood outside the cafe, hands in my coat pockets, watching people filter in and out. It was small. Warm. Too modest for what he deserved, but every inch of it looked like him. Soft lighting. Muted walls. Old books stacked in corners. Plants he probably forgot to water. I smiled. He was doing fine. Better than fine. I wasn't going to go in. Not really. I just wanted to see it. To know he was okay. But then he stepped out, carrying a tray of muffins. He didn't see me at first. He was laughing, really laughing, with an older couple gently arguing over who got the last one. And then his eyes lifted. And he saw me. He froze. The tray shifted slightly in his hands. His smile faded, but not in panic. Not in pain. Just surprise. For a few seconds, neither of us moved. Then he walked over slowly. No rush. He stopped in front of me, lifted his chin. You're early, he said. I blinked. Early. His lips twitched. I thought you'd show up eventually. I had bets you'd come next week. I exhaled, half a laugh, half a relief. You expected me? I didn't know what to expect. But I figured if you were still you, you'd try. I'm not who I was. I know, that's why you're standing outside, he said. I looked past him, through the windows. The place was full of life. Soft music. Happy noise. He'd built something. Something without me. And it was beautiful. Can I come in? I asked. He stared at me for a long moment. Then said quietly, only if you don't try to fix anything. I nodded. I'm just here for coffee. And what if it's terrible? I'll still drink it. He tilted his head. Then finally smiled. Come in, but no CEO crap, he said. Promise. The warmth hit me instantly when I stepped inside. The smell of sugar and espresso. The quiet clatter of mugs. The way the light hit the counter. He moved behind it like he belonged there. No pretense. No mask. Still like your coffee bitter? He asked. I hesitated. Maybe a little sweet now, I said. He gave me a look. Half smile. Half something else. Figures. When he handed me the cup, our fingers brushed. Just slightly, but neither of us flinched. I took a sip. It wasn't perfect. Too much sugar. But I didn't care. Because it was the first thing he gave me in this life without fear in his eyes. and I'd take it, even if it was the last. Chapter 15. Still burning, still here. It was late when the cafe emptied. The chairs were stacked. The lights dimmed to a soft golden glow, and Lin Yuheng was wiping down the counter, sleeves rolled up, expression distant, but calm. I was still sitting at the corner table, my untouched coffee gone cold. I hadn't left. He hadn't asked me to. That, in itself, felt like a miracle. "You're still here," he said without looking at me. I wasn't sure if I should be. He set the rag down. "You're not pushing. That's new. I learned something. Love isn't about who stays longest. It's about who learns how to leave when they're the problem," I said. He looked at me then, softly, but not kindly. "Not yet. Just honestly. You said you loved me." I nodded. "I did. Still, yes." His hands curled slightly at his sides. "But I don't know if I still love you," he said. "I wouldn't trust you if you did." That surprised him. I stood, walked slowly toward the counter. "I don't want your forgiveness, Yuheng. I didn't say I was offering it. I don't want your love either." That made him stop. He looked at me sharply, and I finished. "Not the version you gave me before. The one built on fear, and silence, and desperation. I want nothing that costs you your dignity again." His expression softened. His voice, though, stayed level. "And if I never love you again, then I'll still be proud of you." He stared at me, then looked down at his hands. "They don't shake anymore when I pick up a cup, when someone raises their voice," he said. I noticed. "You know what changed?" "What?" He looked back at me and said, "I stopped trying to be small enough to be loved." God, that hit harder than anything he'd said in 2 lives. I stepped back, not in fear, in reverence, in awe, because this wasn't the man I broke. This was the one he chose to become without me, and I didn't deserve him. But maybe, just maybe, I could stand beside him without ruining it this time. "I'm going to leave now," I said. He nodded slowly. "You're not staying?" "No. I thought you'd push harder." "I'm done pushing, but I'll come back," I said. "Why?" "Because I want to know who you are now." He didn't answer, just walked to the window and looked out at the night. The street outside was quiet. Summer bugs chirped. A few scattered fireflies blinked through the air. Faint, fleeting, but alive. I stepped up beside him. Our reflections blurred in the glass. He whispered, "They only show up when it's warm." "What?" "Fireflies. They need heat, stillness. You can't chase them. If you do, they disappear." I looked at him. "Then I'll stop chasing." He met my gaze. A long beat. Then he said, "You can stay for a while. Not forever. Not a promise. But not a goodbye either. Just 2 people standing in the dark, with something flickering between them again. Not a fire, but a light. And that was enough."